What I'm about to show you is not Elden Ring 2. It is not an Elden Ring DLC. It is an Elden Ring spin-off that is going to play very differently from Elden Ring itself. I believe that for a lot of people, this game might end up not being your speed. However, this is very much From Software trying out something very new, something that they haven't really done before, and something that I personally find quite interesting. So, let's take a look at it, shall we? So first, we're going to be playing out the trailer in its entirety without any interruptions, and then after that, I'm going to be breaking down the trailer, which means I'm going to be pausing it often and giving you guys additional feedback based on the information that I've been researching throughout the day. And then after that breakdown, we're going to take a real deep dive, and I'm going to show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes on Elden Ring Nightreign. So let's begin.
Of redemption. You were chosen, thrown together by forces beyond our control. Tragedy must be averted. And for that, I need your help.
Stand tall. The night is far from over. Little pillager, bent on stacking the lands of gold. I will swat away any and all who dare approach.
Band together and prepare to claim. The life of the Night Lord.
Elden Ring Nightreign 2025. And they don't actually say it in this video, but there's going to be a network test that you can register for on the 10th of January. Okay, so first and foremost, what exactly is Elden Ring Nightreign? Because you're going to watch that trailer and you're going to come out of it really confused. I know that I was. My reaction's up on the channel in case you guys are curious. I'm like, is this a battle royale? What the hell's going on? And this game is a 3-player co-op roguelike. That's right, they've made a version of Elden Ring that's been designed from the ground up to be played in multiplayer co-op. And that is something that I've expressed in the past, I've always kind of wanted. Now, I didn't really expect it to be a roguelike, which kind of throws a couple of things in the mix that I wasn't really expecting, but they're very interesting. So let's go ahead and watch this trailer again, except this time I'm going to be pausing and giving you guys some additional context as we go throughout the many scenes. So I'm going to lower the volume here just so that you guys are not getting your eardrums blasted as we go through this. So obviously, as you guys can see here, this is Limgrave. Now, if you pay attention, you're going to see different zones throughout the trailer, and you might be thinking, okay, so this is not Limgrave though, but it is Limgrave, except it is an altered version of Limgrave. Hell, even the version that we're watching right here has different things. Like you can see these tornadoes going around, and maybe even some of the topography is not going to be particularly familiar to a specific area. There might be monsters in there that you're not really expecting. And there's also one of those kind of like top 10 best hits from software games going on, wherein they're bringing in monsters from previous games. A lot of this is going to be explained in the, more in-depth analysis in terms of what you can expect from this, how does this connect from a lore perspective and all of that stuff. But the reality of it is, I don't think they need this to make sense. What they're trying to do is like, we just want this to be fun. This is mostly not going to be a story-driven experience from what I can tell, and it is more a gameplay-oriented experience. As you can see, this section of Limgrave looking different already because this is the bridge that goes from the different locations in Limgrave, and it's like all smashed up and whatnot, and there's stuff happening to this fort, and there's new structures and all of that. So it is different from what you know of Limgrave, and that's intentional. And even then, some of these things are going to change depending on which boss fight you choose to hunt, which that's another concept we're going to be exploring further in the video. Now, one of the first things that you are going to see is this encroaching wall of fire. And we're going to get an even better glimpse of it a little bit further in the trailer, so I'll talk more about it then. And then here you see like a completely different visual of Limgrave, like in terms of weather and all of that stuff. And this is just to tell you, this is still basically this other version of Limgrave that they have for this game, but everything is kind of different because you've chosen a different monster to hunt and the conditions in the scenario have changed. That's going to be kind of like a theme that we're going to be revisiting. The map is always going to be changing from session to session to kind of like keep things fresh. At least that is the intention that they have. Now, one of the things that I want you to pay attention to in this next portion is that there's going to be a character running through at breakneck speed. That gives you an indication of the pacing that this game is going to have, and that is why I've been saying that this is going to be a very different experience, because if you think about Elden Ring, you're thinking about a more methodical experience. You're jumping into a dungeon, you're being very careful, taking your time room by room, at least the first time that you're going through. At least that's the way that I play it. Different people are going to play it different, but that's not going to be the intention for this game. You're going to be jumping in, running head first, butchering monsters super fast, leveling up, progressing, and, just basically going to be a much faster paced game. So, look at the speed this character has when it shows up. Okay, so here's the wall encroaching in. And as you can tell, this feels very much like a Battle Royale mechanic. You can see the wall all the way over here, and then there's like a circle coming all the way over here. So what's the idea behind this? So this game is going to feature a day-night cycle. And during the day, you're going to be fighting hordes of monsters and powering up and all of that stuff. But this circle is going to be encroaching in on your position. So the idea is you're powering up while this circle is getting closer and closer, which is closing off different areas of the map that you can't go to in order to power up anymore. And then eventually the circle is going to reach a minimum size. And at that point, it's going to be nighttime and a boss is going to spawn. And hopefully, during the time that the circle has been encroaching on your position, you've used that time wisely to level up and gather loot and get experience and all of that stuff. And then you're going to be using everything that you've gathered to fight this boss fight, and then the cycle resets for 3 days and 3 nights, and on the final night, you're going to fight the final boss that you've actually targeted for this specific session. One of the important things here is also the From Software logo being front and center. The reason why this is important is because it tells you this isn't just a spin-off that is being made by a completely different company. No, this is a From Software game. They're not just using the Elden Ring IP and just putting a skin from a different company. It is being developed by From Software. Again, the wall encroaching. Seems like sites of grace are not going to be accessible once the wall goes through them. And just look at the speed.
Seekers of redemption,
Mobility is going to be crazy.
you were chosen. Thrown together by
This
force.
right here is a Spectral Hawk mechanic. This is going to be a Traversal mechanic. I believe that when you are first, from all of the experiences that I've seen from videos and interviews and all of that stuff, when you are first deploying on the map, when you're first entering the map, everybody kind of enters in a Spectral Hawk. But then there's going to be specific spots in the map where you can pick up the Spectral Hawk, and it'll be like a traversal mechanic that will take you to certain places in the map. And more likely than not, those traversal points are going to change depending on the layout of the map. At least that is my conclusion from what I've seen so far.
Forces beyond our control.
And here you can see a Limgrave that looks very different because, like I said, things are going to change. Here you're going to see what is essentially an exaggerated, like, combat art, right? Because usually you do have some abilities like this, but you will see throughout this trailer that there's going to be more and more exaggerated combat arts and weapon abilities. Like here you have this class that is the Guardian, and he's going to do this little tornado attack thing, which kind of like CC's monsters, because that is going to be the role of this class. You're going to have to choose preset classes, which I'll get into more detail a little bit further ahead in the video. But yeah, you're going to choose a preset class. You're not going to be making your own class, so keep that in mind. This right here is the Wilder, and one of his special abilities is that grappling hook that you guys see right there. He wields a longsword. He's kind of like your basic knight type of guy from what I've seen from videos and stuff like that. And yeah, the grappling hook's his thing. That right there is the Duchess. Like, I'm sorry, these cuts come through so fast that it's kind of hard to keep up. But the one that shows up behind, that is the Duchess. She also has a really cool ability, and she is kind of like a roguish type character. But she's also got a really cool ultimate that I'll talk to you guys more about later. This is the Guardian doing his ultimate, which he goes into the air, jumps, does a massive slam with big AoE. I don't know which character this is. I don't think that's the Wilder,
Tragedy
though it
must
could
be
be.
averted.
We see a Firekeeper from Dark Souls 3, which is kind of like weird, but just wait, because obviously you've seen the other character.
I need your help.
This character, I don't know who it is yet, the one doing the jump, because we just don't know enough information. The Spectral Hawk that I told you guys about that goes to different places. And obviously, in case you guys haven't noticed, this right here is Limgrave. Except when you look at this area, you have to imagine it without lava and instead with water. Yeah, if you imagine this area with water, you'll be like, wait, that is Limgrave. Yes, exactly. But it's going to look very, very different depending on what map you've chosen or what boss you're hunting. And even sometimes just like random events are going to be happening throughout to keep things fresh. But the developers have expressed that you will begin to know the field the more you play the game, and you'll be able to use it to your advantage, even though certain things are going to change. And here we're about to see the wall run ability, which just shows you that there's so much more mobility this time around. And it does seem like the class that I didn't recognize, that's the Wilder. It's just the first time that I saw it, it didn't have the wing. I didn't pay attention to the winged helm.
Is far from over.
Yes, that is the Nameless King. He's come back to haunt you in your nightmares in Elden Ring. Why is the Nameless King in Elden Ring? The only answer that I have for you there is probably because the game director thought, you know what? Wouldn't it be fun to just bring the Nameless King to Elden Ring? And people were like, maybe? And he was like, cool. Okay, we're going to bring it back. I think that's pretty much the logic behind it. They'll probably come up with some lore reason as to why it happens. But I think that the reality is they wanted to do it just because it'd be cool, and that's that. This is a title that takes a lot of really bold approaches to game design, by the way.
Little pillager. Bent on stacking the lands of gold.
That's going to be another boss that we're going to be fighting. There's an archer class that we still don't know who that class is at this point, I don't think.
Dare approach.
I actually have a sneaky suspicion that this guy is going to be particularly important, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe he's even just like a minor boss. But I almost get this idea that he might be the Night Lord that they talk about in this title. But I don't know. This is a Cerberus-like encounter, which, again, you guys can see the co-op gameplay and all of that stuff, and it seems like it'll be pretty fun. You're jumping over the sword, that's a mechanic. Throws fireballs, all of that good stuff.
Band together and prepare to claim.
You can see the characters here. This is the Duchess, this is the Wilder, and this is the Guardian, which, again, are 3 classes that I'll talk more about their abilities a little bit.
The life of the Night Lord.
So the Night Lord appears to be the very final boss of the game. And the idea is you're going to be doing all of these other bosses. You're going to be evolving your characters. And then eventually you're going to confront the Night Lord as kind of like the pinnacle encounter of the game, so to speak. But now it's time for us to get really in depth into all of the features that I've been looking into. And for this part of the video, I'm just going to be alternating between footage of my face and footage from the trailer that you guys just saw, because that is the only footage that we have of Elden Ring Nightreign up until this point. So, once again, I would like to reinforce, this is not Elden Ring 2, this is not an Elden Ring expansion, it is an Elden Ring spin-off, and it is going to play very differently. I really, really do hope that people do not come into this game expecting a traditional Elden Ring gameplay experience. Things are going to be very different. So, having said that, this is an experimental title. Like I already said, it is a 3-player co-op roguelike. And what Kitao said on Twitter, who is somebody that works at From Software, he says, Elden Ring Nightreign is a new co-op action survival game where players join forces to face overwhelming odds. We hope you look forward to something a little different to our previous games and the renewed sense of accomplishment its challenges bring. Now, the vibes that I'm getting from this game after doing a whole bunch of research today is almost PvE MOBA. So if you ever played a MOBA, you know about you're going to be killing creeps, you're going to be leveling up, and then you progress into the enemy's base and kill them. Except in here, rather than progressing into the enemy's base, you're fighting and leveling up to eventually fight a boss, and then you're going to level up some more, fight another boss, then you're going to level up some more and fight a final boss, and that's the end of the encounter. This is not a DLC. It is going to be a completely standalone game. It is going to be priced like an expansion, so more than likely it's going to be around the $40 range, I would expect. And this is being directed by Junya Ishizaki. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name. Miyazaki was involved during the initial concept phase, but ultimately he ended the reins to Junya Ishizaki. And this is part of the From Software culture, which Miyazaki has expressed in the past, where he said that, like, we want to, foment a culture where we're going to be bringing up new directors, and this is one of those. And Miyazaki's like, hey, it's time for you to be a director, choose what game you want to make. And this guy was like, okay, well, considering the things that I've worked on, I want to do something that uses the combat system of Elden Ring, and I want to do it based on a more multiplayer-centric experience. So his experience, according to what he said in the IGN interview, was, I've been involved with development on From games since the original Dark Souls, where I was a level designer, and on Bloodborne, I was level designer and battle designer, and on Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring, I was a combat designer. So he's very familiar with the combat experience, and that is kind of like what he wants to bring to the forefront. He wants to really build upon the basis of Elden Ring combat and elevate that quite a few notches. Now, I know that a lot of people are super involved in the lore of Elden Ring, so when they hear about Elden Ring Nightreign, they might be coming in and be like, okay, so what's the lore going to be like? How's this going to connect into, the base game of Elden Ring and all of that stuff? And here's what he said in the IGN interview. Does the lore of Nightreign tie into the stories of Elden Ring or Shadow of the Erdtree, or even a possible Elden Ring 2, or is it completely standalone? And Junya Ishizaki says, we'd like fans to think of Nightreign as an Elden Ring spin-off first and foremost. The story is completely separate and parallel to the world of Elden Rings. If you had to tie it in some way, we had the events of the Shattering in the original game. After the events of the Shattering, this is a completely separate branch of the Elden Ring story. It almost feels like they want this to be a separate universe altogether. So like the Shattering, and then there's a multiverse, and this is like a different universe from the one where the original Elden Ring takes place. We understand that there's a great deal of emotional attachment to the story of Elden Ring that a lot of the fans have. So we didn't want to encroach on that too much. We wanted it to coexist within the existing story, and for players both familiar and new to enjoy both of these stories separately. IGN digs in a little bit further and they ask, so does this mean that George R.R. Martin Martin has no influence on Nightreign's story or world, and Ishizaki says that's correct. Now, another aspect of this is people are going to start thinking, oh my god, it's a multiplayer game. We're looking at what From Software going free to play, Battle Pass. I've already said this is going to be a premium price game, kind of like an expansion. But not only that, Ishizaki specifically expressed this is not a live service. This is likely not going to have any microtransactions or battle pass. So IGN posed the question in kind of a interesting way that I really appreciated, which is, do you think it's risky at all at this point to launch a new multiplayer game, given other recent failures like Concord or Suicide Squad? The landscape is quite challenging in the multiplayer space. And Junichi Ishizaki comes in like the absolute Giga Chad and just says, we don't tend to look at the industry and base our game design or our concerns on what's going on in that sort of more general sense. So he's saying, I don't care. We feel like if we're making something we're passionate about and that we want to make and that we enjoy playing, we trust the users will share in that experience and hopefully enjoy it as well. Also, we want to be clear that Nightreign is not a live service game. Once you buy Nightreign, you get the complete package. Everything is unlockable out the gate. So we wanted to be clear that this is what we wanted to make. It is not intended as a live service game. So doubling down, tripling down on this not being a live service game. Now, this does not mean that they will not do updates and stuff like that. I would expect them to do maybe some updates in the future, depending on how successful the game is, because this is very much them just taking a stab at, oh, let's try and see what we can do with a multiplayer co-op game, which is something that I've always wanted to see. Now, let's get into some more details about the co-op nature of the game. This is a game designed for 3-player co-op, like I said. There is going to be matchmaking, but now I know a lot of people are going to be asking, but can I solo it? The answer is yes. The game will scale down if you only play in single player. So that is definitely an option. They understand that a lot of the, Souls fan base, they like to solo these games, and therefore they want to make sure that you have that option. But having said that, this is very much, an experience that was crafted to be played with 3 players, and it is meant to be challenging even if you have 3 players. Another thing that has been made very clear in the interviews is that this does not support 2 players only. So you either go in with 3 players or you go in with 1 player. And like I've already stated, I believe there will be matchmaking. So even if you're just by yourself, you don't have any friends, you can do matchmaking and you'll be teamed up with a group of individuals. Now, I have a translation here that Gaijin Hunter did from the Famitsu interview, where they say, do you need to play co-op as a 3-person group? And they specifically say, we designed the game 3 players in mind. However, we do know players sometimes prefer to play alone at their own pace, so we added solo play as an option since player choice is ultimately the most important thing. However, we must reiterate that we designed the game with 3 players in mind, and the difficulty is also tuned to be challenging for those 3 players. I know that I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because Gaijin mentioned on Twitter that, from his translation, this is very much intended as a 3-player experience. So keep that in mind. So what is the game loop going to be? You're going to choose a boss to hunt. You go and you hunt him. You're going to enter the game world. As soon as you enter the game world, it is going to be daytime. You're going to start killing stuff to earn EXP to be able to level up. You're also going to be looting chests and killing bosses to get special gear as well as special abilities. So just going around collecting loot and killing stuff, almost like a turbocharged dungeon crawl, kind of. These things are going to be random. So, between sessions, you can expect those loot drops to be different. There's going to be a day-night cycle, like I've already mentioned. Each day cycle lasts between 10 and 15 minutes. It hasn't been made perfectly clear. In some interviews, they say 10 minutes. In other interviews, they say 15. So between 10 and 15 minutes is going to be your daytime. That is the time that you have to run around the map, kill as many things as you possibly can. And during those 10 to 15 minutes, the circle is going to begin encroaching, like I said, the Battle Royale circle. And as it encroaches, eventually you're going to reach a point where it's just one arena. Now, one of the decisions you guys are going to have to make is, do we go together as a group and we kill really tough things, or do we separate and then collapse at the end? Because you're going to forcefully collapse that at the end. You're either going to collapse or you're going to die. Because, the circle is going to force players to beat together at the end, very much like a Battle Royale, because it is kind of like the Battle Royale mechanic. And, Once that day is over, nighttime comes, everybody's going to be in an arena, a boss is going to spawn, and then you fight it. Now, the boss that spawns is not the boss that you selected. It is going to be another boss. There's going to be a pool of bosses that can spawn. You go in there, you kill that boss. Then there's going to be loot for killing that boss, and there's also going to be a choice that you will have where you can get, instead of loot, you can get maybe special abilities or something like that, or power up your character in some other way. And then after that, it's going to be daytime again. The circle is going to expand, and you rinse and repeat. Now, monsters do not respawn. There's a quote that I will give you guys a little bit later. So you will have to go like different parts of the map to gain more power, explore more things. And then again, circle is going to collapse again. And then the boss is going to spawn, kill that boss, circle expands again, collect some more loot, get some more EXP, all of that good stuff, and collapse a third time, which is, like I said, 3 days, 3 nights. And on the third night, you're going to fight the boss that you actually selected. And then, you're going to kill it. And if you kill it, you win. If you don't kill it, you die. The way that death works is that if you die, you're going to be put into like a down state, and then other players can come and resurrect you. The way that you resurrect other players is you smack them. You hit them, you attack them. That's pretty much it. Which kind of like makes sense, because if you're in the middle of a confrontation and there's just like a bunch of monsters around and you're all fighting, somebody falls and you can like be attacking the monsters and maybe resurrecting players at the same time. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, you're going to attack players, resurrect them. There's going to be a time limit to how long you can stay down. And then I think that character just dies and they're out of it. If everybody dies, game over. It is what it is. If you die before you get to the final boss and defeat it, game over. You have to restart all over again. After you finish the run, characters are going to reset. And by the way, each run is designed to last for about 40 minutes, give or take. But by the time you finish that run, all of the characters' levels reset for the next run. So the next run, you're going to be starting from scratch. However, there is a currency that you're going to be getting in between sessions that is going to allow you to gain a little bit of power. Although you're not going to get like additional levels or anything like that, but it is going to change the way that you play the game. It's kind of like a roguelike. So the way that they've said this in the Famitsu interview was, we have the interviewer here asking, after surviving 3 days, players return to the base. While equipment can't be carried over, is there anything that they can keep? And Ishizaki says, at the end of each session, players receive rewards in the form of marks, a currency used within the base, and relics, which are equipable items. What are relics? Ishizaki, think of them as blood gems in Bloodborne. Relics grant passive abilities to characters. Each character has pedestals where relics can be equipped. You can purchase different pedestals using marks to modify how relics are utilized. So not only you get these things that you can kind of socket, you can kind of change the way that your sockets work, is my understanding. It is important to mention that the Famitsu translation is being made through ChatGPT, so there might be some light inaccuracies here, but I kind of feel like the overall vibe is correct. Relic effects can vary wildly from straightforward stat boosts to enhancements for skills, arts, or basic actions. Customizing with relics greatly impacts strategies and gameplay. You will also be able to buy additional skins for the characters as well as gestures using this currency that you get in between matches. So you'll have to choose, okay, do I want to power up some stuff, or do I have enough power and I just want to like get a little bit of cosmetic glam going? You get to choose between those things. I don't believe that these are going to be sold for real money, and the idea is that you just accrue currency by playing the game, and then you basically upgrade your character. But I would wait on that because it's not entirely clear. I don't think that their intention is to have microtransactions, but who knows? So allow me to actually play the game, or, if I get a chance to do an interview or something like that, and then I'll be able to give you guys more information. Now, the map itself, like I said, this takes place in like some alternate version of Limgrave, is going to feature random elements. And here's what Ishizaki had to say on the Famitsu interview. Let me explain the map first. The game features a vast field scattered with bases and small dungeons to explore. These elements are randomly rearranged at the start of each session and remain fixed for the duration. Bases and dungeons contain enemies, treasure chests, and other interactive elements. Defeating enemies grants runes, which serve as experience points, where treasure chests yield weapons and items. Various weapons are available, with their stats and special abilities randomized. During the day, players strengthen their characters and gear through exploration, preparing for nighttime boss battles. This cycle repeats for 3 days. And then in the IGN interview, he said this. So there will not be a whole new map type, depending on the boss you select, but there will be some quite drastic changes to the map that occur as you progress through the game. The reason for this, we wanted to keep this experience quite condensed and concentrated on this another Limgrave so that players could learn and adjust and create that most optimized play to enjoy that sort of new sense of accomplishment and discovery with Nightreign. Learning within these confinements is what we aimed for. And IGN follows up. So there were volcanoes and meteor strikes and things to come as the map evolves. And Ishizaki says, yes, that's correct. Those elements are supposed to encourage those repeat plays and change up the session each time. So you guys get a basic idea of what the gameplay loop is. Now, one of the things that I told you is there's going to be preset characters for you to play. You're not going to make your own character. And so I have a couple of data on some of the characters that I've collated from different videos and all of that stuff. There might be more data out there already. As you guys can imagine, all this information is quite fresh. But one of the characters is the Wilder, the one that has like the winged helmet. He is an armored knight. He's got a grappling hook and a longsword. Grappling hook allows him to pull enemies, as you guys have seen. I don't know what effect that will have on bosses, if any. Then we have the Duchess, which is a more speedy character. She's got a magic dagger, and her ultimate is actually quite interesting. It lets her repeat the damage that you or your allies have done to an enemy. So one of the things that a lot of people said they were doing is they were using the Guardian, which I'll detail in a couple of seconds, but you guys saw the big dive bomb ability in the trailer. That's the Guardian. So what some people were doing as a strategy is they would do the big dive bomb, and then they would go in with the Duchess and use her repeat damage ability after that. So it's like big damage from Birdman, and then Duchess goes in and repeats that big damage, which is an interesting thing, and it requires quite a bit of like coordination with other players and stuff like that. So then we have Guardian, which is the Birdman that you see in the trailer. He is a tanky boy. Apparently he's one of the tankiest characters. And he's got the dive bomb that you guys have seen, AoE, which does AoE damage and adds a defense boost for your allies. So if you're like within the AoE range, you get a buff for whenever he does that dive bomb. And he also has the tornado attack that does a little bit of CC on the enemies. I don't know exactly how this works mana-wise. I haven't really found specific information about that, how often you're going to be able to do these abilities and stuff like that. But, you know, that's going to be something that's going to come at a later date, I guess. Then we have the Recluse, which is been described as a frail mage, absorbs essences from enemies and then unleashes them in a special attack. So we're talking like bleeds, poisons, stuff like that. I don't understand if the idea is somebody hits the Recluse and then they kind of like reflect that back, or if, say, one of your allies does a bleeding on an enemy and then the Recluse extracts that essence and collects it and then eventually unleashes it in a special attack. The Recluse was a little bit weird. I haven't found too much detail on it. And then in the IGN interview, it was also mentioned that there is a character which uses one Spirit Ash as kind of like a companion, and that's your mechanic. So I'm assuming that's going to be almost like a summoner type of class. But yeah, you don't use Spirit Ashes like you've used in Elden Ring, but there is one character that has a Spirit Ash that is his companion. A little bit more detail about the characters themselves, Ishizaki mentions in the IGN interview. So the reason, first of all, just for some context for having these set characters, was we wanted to create this multiplayer experience that you could just jump into very quickly and casually without worrying too much about character creation or character build off the bat. So these characters are going to have like presets. They also have like level up presets that we're going to go into a little bit, but yeah, they're kind of like pre-made characters, right? It's the build is already there, the basis, and then you can kind of like switch it up based on the loot that you accrue while you are playing the game. So with that as the kind of initial staple for the design, we set about designing these different characters and their specialties, and quite quickly we landed on their unique skills and ultimate arts, and we figured that we wanted more of an action gameplay focus rather than landing them in a sort of preset type of character. There's the mage, there's the warrior, there's the tank. We wanted them to each feel unique in their gameplay and their skills and abilities from the get-go. Another very important detail, because naturally, you know, IGN sees, oh, you want people to be able to jump in a little bit more quickly and casually, so, you know, obviously, you know exactly what they're going to ask for, right? So IGN asks, One of the sort of big selling points of this game mentioned in the presentation yesterday is that it's more approachable to newcomers, but it's still quite challenging. So are there any further assists you can toggle on, such as starting a session at a higher level or something? You know, like an easy mode. And Junya Ishizaki, the absolute Giga Chad, just says, "We don't have any such assist features or settings included. We put a lot of faith in our players regardless of their skill level. We believe that anybody can beat these games if they just go in with an open mind and a will to try. We've also incorporated the relic system where you get these rewards from each run as you experienced yesterday, and even from a mildly or less successful run, you can get these relics and gradually upgrade your roster and build up these characters for your next session, so we hope this gives players an incentive to keep on trying." Now, another important thing that I've been mentioning throughout this video is that combat and progression is going to feel very different from the combat and progression of traditional Elden Ring. You're looking at what is going to be a much faster paced Elden Ring combat. You're looking at much faster movement. You're not going to get any fall damage at all, so you can just like jump off of cliffs. That's fine, no problem. You're running up on walls like we've seen in the trailer. You have the spectral Raven traversal, not Raven, spectral hawk. In my notes, I typed Raven. At some fixed points, which I believe are going to also change depending on the map layout and all of that stuff. And there's going to be overall faster progression. Leveling is going to be more streamlined, so you're not really going to be choosing individual stats for the characters. It's more going to be like each character, as they level up, they're going to progress in wherever their specialty is. So it's kind of like a template, so you probably just hit a level me up button and it levels up the character and it becomes stronger. At least that's what it seems to be the case from the interviews because, information is still a little bit flowy at this moment. And then there's going to be lots of loot. They emphasize this. The loot is going to be color-coded, kind of like Diablo. So, purple for epic, maybe orange for legendary, green for common, blue for rare. It's going to have something similar to that. And you can expect the weapon arts to be more exaggerated, as well as some of the abilities that the characters are going to get, and even the items. In one of the interviews, they mentioned that, for instance, the firebomb is going to explode much bigger and is going to deal more damage, stuff like that. And then following up with this, there was a question on the Famitsu interview where they say, "It seems you can enjoy the essence of Elden Ring while experience new actions in multiplayer." And Ishizaki says that's right. While the control scheme hasn't changed significantly from the Dark Souls series or Elden Ring, the game rules are very different, so the experience itself should feel distinct. For example, when encountering enemies along the way where previously it might have felt like a wall is blocking the player's path as appeared, in this game it feels more like I found prey to strengthen myself, let's take it down. It's a different gameplay feel, and I hope players will enjoy that. And this, I feel, is one of the most important things. And again, this is Famitsu interview translated through ChatGPT, so it might not be exactly super accurate, but I think that the overall vibe is conveyed. But this is going to be one of the biggest differences that I think a lot of people are going to feel weirdly about, which is the combat in Elden Ring, the first time that you're going through it, is always going to feel like something more slow, methodical. You're going in there, you're trying to figure out what's going on. And this time it's going to be faster, and the idea is going to be I'm getting EXP. I'm killing this enemy because I want to level up. It's not like I'm killing this enemy so that I can explore what's behind this enemy. It's like I got to kill this enemy fast because there's a firewall coming behind me. I got to kill him, get his loot, and leave. Right? That's kind of like the overall vibe that I get. And then the interviewer at Famitsu also asks, "I assume that weapons you find vary in performance. Does this mean their attack power differs?" And Ishizaki says, "Weapons differ in three major aspects. First, their attack power. The higher it is, the more damage you deal. Second, there are skills similar to the Ashes of War in Elden Ring. Lastly, they have additional effects. These can range from buffs like increased power for X attribute or enhanced damage reduction to unique effects such as magic projectiles appear when dashing. Most of these additional effects activate just by having the weapon in your inventory. And by having it in your inventory, they mean equipped. I believe somewhere I saw, but this is not super well confirmed yet, but I saw somewhere that you're going to be able to equip 3 weapons on each hand. So I think that's what they mean. So like if you find this special bow that's really cool, you can equip that and you get the passive effect even if you're not shooting arrows. So that's what they mean. Most of these additional effects activate just by having the item in your inventory. For example, if you find a bow with a desirable effect but don't plan to use bows, you can still carry it for its effect. Stacking these effects is one of the unique charms of this game. So again, the whole roguelike thing. This should feel very familiar for people that play roguelikes. So let's talk a little bit more about the gameplay cycle of the 3 dates, 3 nights, all of that stuff. So Junya Ishizaki said in the IGN interview, initially when we set out to make Nightreign, we wanted what we're calling a condensed RPG experience. We wanted to take all those elements from Elden Ring that players enjoyed, like the exploration, the building of the character, fighting tough bosses, the sense of discovery, and condense that into a shorter, tighter play session, which is, like I mentioned, is probably going to be about 40 minutes per session. Also, we wanted to include this idea of having peaks and valleys to the gameplay. So there's got to be a flow there. Bring the players up for the highs, and then it gets a little bit easier. Then they get to enjoy the gradual flow of gameplay. So this is the whole thing about during the day, it's probably things going to be a little bit easier. And then, you collect your loot, you get your XP, all that stuff. And then you get to the nighttime, things going to be harder. You're going to have to do that boss fight. And then after the boss, it goes back to the day. So those are the highs and the lows, I feel. And again, this was a balanced decision that came through development, but eventually that settled on a 3-day structure. This was something that I already mentioned. IGN asks, do enemies respawn after the first day of a cycle? And Ishizaki confirms, no, there's no respawning between days and no respawning when you visit a site of grace either. So what this means is that as you are playing through the game, you are whatever you happen to do on the first day, you're going to have to remember, because on the second day, you're going to want to go on a different direction and do something different because stuff's not going to respawn. Then IGN talks about these red corpses that I have no idea what this is, but they say, the red corpses are great sources of loot. Who do they represent? And Ishizaki says, so this is Nightreign's unique asynchronous online element. This is actually gear left from a previous player who died on that spot. So they're still keeping up the tradition of bloodstains, except this time around, rather than just seeing a bloodstain, you'll see like a red corpse, and that's a player who died there. And you get to get maybe like a couple of items of their loot, which is actually a pretty interesting mechanic. So that's their way to leave their mark on the world and influence the session of another player, even if they happen to fail. Now, despite having this, there's not going to be messages out in the world because players are not going to have time to be writing messages, but you might see other phantoms doing stuff while you're playing on your own session. So now let's get a little bit more about game progression in between runs, because obviously you're like, okay, so how am I going to unlock more bosses and stuff like that? And you are going to be unlocking more bosses as you play through the game. And in the IGN interview, they asked, my squad eventually beat the final boss on the 3rd day after numerous attempts, and then immediately afterwards we played through it again and beat it a 2nd time, and it was a lot easier. I'm assuming that this is because now they have practice and also they have relics and stuff like that. How will the finished game be structured? Is there an incentive to play through it again, or will you unlock more bosses or harder versions of previous bosses? Nishizaki says there's going to be 8 boss types of final boss in the game, and as you progress through, these will be gradually unlocked and become available to fight. And that's pretty much most of the information that I could find. They also have this thing where they talk about that communication is going to be simplified, so you're going to be jumping in and there's going to be like a way to ping stuff for other players. But other than that, there's like no big stamps, no big text mode chat, because you're not going to have time. You're going to be rushing through. But they do say, you can still use stuff like Discord and other third-party apps to talk with people. Like if you're on PlayStation, you can use PlayStation Party. Obviously, Xbox has their own party system as well. So that's something that like, hey, if you want to do that, you can do that. Or otherwise, you don't have to. It's not mandatory. You don't need that much communication to do this. So yeah, that's their design intent. That is everything that we know so far about Elden Ring Nightreign. If you enjoyed this video, which has taken me quite a long time to produce, please do hit the like button as it helps me out immensely. And if you want to stay up to date with any new information regarding this game or Monster Hunter or Path of Exile and other interesting news, do feel free to subscribe and hit the bell notification. See you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe. Peace out.